Today is going to be a masterclass on seamless editing techniques. We're going to break down the brand new Lil Uzi music video, Just Wanna Rock, directed by the great Gibson Hazard. But before we start, I want to mention that I'm having a huge 30% off sale for Black Friday, starting from now until Monday night. I don't do sales that often, so this is a great chance to get your hands on tools like my After Effects animation extension, my Speed Demon 2 transition bundle, or the new Psychedelic Master effects pack at a sizable discount. You can check all that out by clicking the link at the top of my description. I think this video is a perfect example of matching a visual with a song, and there's a lot of little editing techniques sprinkled throughout, so let's get right into it. Now, starting off right at the beginning here, we have the first of many seamless little transitions, and that is using the match cut. You'll see that used a bunch throughout this video. You have a shot of turning this little knob here, and that transitions into this spinning drone shot. And if we let this spin play out, you guys can see it spins into our giant planet shot here and into our title scene. Really cool. Let's go and show you guys how to make this crazy seamless spin transition right here. So let's hop into After Effects, and this is pretty simple. I've already went ahead and downloaded some royalty-free drone footage from pexels.com, and I've created a new 1920 by 1080 composition here. So let's drag our footage in. We have this shot of this lady in the pool, similar to that drone shot with somebody in the center. What we're gonna do is go to our effects and presets over here on the right, and we're gonna search for the transform effect. So go ahead and place that onto our clip. And then in our effect controls, we're just going to click and activate our keyframes right here at the start of our composition. Let's drag for how long we want this spin to last. I'm thinking like 4 seconds. And then we're going to take this rotation value in our effect controls, and let's give it a rotation value of 8 revolutions. So we'll just type in 8 and enter. And if we open up our effects here and open up transform, you guys can see we've created a keyframe so that everything starts from 0, rotates 8 times. So now let's play this spin one more time so we can get a better idea. In the original clip here, you see that the spinning starts off pretty slow and then it gradually gets a lot faster. So we need to create some sort of a ramping effect so that it goes slow, ramps up to higher velocity. What we're going to do here is we're going to click to open up our graph editor, and you can see our speed values. So first of all, you can see if we hover over this keyframe, it's saying 720 degrees per second all the way throughout. We don't want that to be the case. Let's take this keyframe and just drag it down close to 0, maybe like 0.57 degrees a second. And we already have more of a liftoff for our spin, but we want to make that a lot more smooth. So go ahead and grab this little yellow arm here and then drag to the right. And you see how we've created a ramp where it's going to gradually start slow and then pick up velocity as we keep going along. It's that easy. So now we just need to piece things together, add a little bit of motion blur here, and then connect together our transition. So for our motion blur, go ahead and click this button to enable motion blur for the composition. And then if you click toggle switches and modes here, you can see the switches for the specific layer. You guys want to turn on your motion blur switch for this layer. And now you're going to see motion blur as that velocity starts to pick up. Pretty cool. You guys can also control the look of this motion blur by going to composition, composition settings, and then under advanced, you guys can change around the shutter angle. Now, one last thing we need to do here, you'll see in the original video, everything is being blurred around Lil Uzi, but he stays pretty clear and visible throughout. So let's just set up a simple little mask. You can click to select your ellipse tool by shortcut Q, or you can just alt click your shapes until you have your circle. Let's select our layer and click Control D to duplicate it. And then on this duplication, let's just take our circle and draw it around our subject. And that's really about it. Now we have a added mask on our subject. The only thing we need to do, again, with toggle switches and modes open, let's just remove the motion blur switch off of that top duplicated layer. And now you can actually see our subject more clear even with the blur. Once the blurring starts picking up, if this mask is too visible, just click M to open up your mask option here, and then just increase the feather so that it's a bit more blended in with the blurring. All right, pretty nice. Let's go and drag in our second shot. So we'll close our graph editor for now. Let's change to our project bin, and I'll drag in this second shot. This is going to be the shot we transition into. You guys need to, depending on how much time you have in your composition, you can go to composition, comp settings, and just click right here to add some more time, the duration, if you need a bit more room to work with. Drag in our next scene, and we'll start it right there. So now let's give this transitionary scene a bit of ending spin, so it looks like it spins into the next scene. Just like before, look up your transform effect, drop it on here. We're gonna go ahead and start this in the negatives, -180, click to set that keyframe, and drag for how long you want this to be, and we can click reset. So let's take a look at the keyframes on that. Effects, transform, here they are. Let's go ahead and enable the motion blur switch for that. You want to try and even these up best you can. I think that looks okay. If you need to, you can reduce this keyframe. Let's add our motion ramp onto this as well. So again, with the graph editor open, this time what you want to do is click the right keyframe and just drag it down. That way you have this sharp velocity and it swings into our lower regular shot. So now what we need to do, let's turn this graph editor off, is we need to clean this up. So anytime you're doing a spin here, you're going to see these black edges or these transparent edges. We need to scale this composition. So let's select all of our layers, right click and pre-compose, and we'll just name this tutorial spin effect. And then let's just scroll to where we see those edges, click S to scale it up and adjust. And just make sure there's no black lines showing on the edges there. And pretty good. If the transition is still abrupt between the two shots, let's pop into here. And these two bottom clips, let's go ahead and just pre-compose them. And we'll rename. Let's drag this clip above for now. We're gonna go ahead and click T to bring up the opacity. And we'll set a little keyframe here. Let's go to where the next clip starts, put that down to 0. You see it just kind of fades out near the end. And then let's do the inverse on the next clip. Let's click T, start it at around like 50. You can see how they're sort of blended together now. Set our keyframe, drag, and set it to 100. And then adjust those keyframe timings if you need to. And there you go. We now have our gradual spin and then it fades into the next scene while keeping that spin. Pretty cool. So let's keep going forward with those lessons in mind. We have a bit of transformation here. You guys could do this with just some overlay clips of some lightning, motion blur, and then using an After Effects camera. We'll talk about that in a bit. I do want to mention another little match cut right here. And again, I'm using that word match cut. You have that when the composition of this scene matches the composition of the next scene. So you see, this is shot 1. And then if I just go frame by frame, this is shot 2. So 2 exactly lined up parts, but 2 different shots. And that's how you have this seamless transition from one shot to the next. And if you guys don't have things naturally lining up, you could always use scaling or After Effects cameras just to get those parts exactly where you want them to and to have those transitions just like that. So when it comes to making something like this, traveling through an object to get to the next scene, another cool little music video editing technique. I did something similar in this future music video that I edited a while back. Let's go ahead and first download a little scene of a car, and then I'm gonna go to FootageCrate.com. You guys can find any stock clips like this all across the internet. There's free green screen clips everywhere. I just looked up electricity stock footage. Go ahead and just download a couple of these little overlay clips to use in our tunnel composition. And then let's just gather some other footage here that we can sort of zoom through. So back in After Effects, let's go ahead and create a new composition, tunnel travel, and let's start dragging in our pieces. We'll take all of our electricity stock clips and let's actually create a new folder for this first. And then we'll drag our clips into there. And then let's grab our starting clip, the car here, and let's set up our camera. All right, so we're going to right click, go to new and create a new camera. And we'll click OK. And for this camera to work, we need to make sure that these layers are 3D layers. So again, toggle switches and modes, click to enable that. And now what we can do is we can click C on our keyboard, and that'll allow us to toggle through these camera controls. We can rotate, pan, and zoom. And you'll see this is a 2D image, but we're able to travel around in 3D space. Let's open up our camera, open up the transform for it, and create some keyframes at the beginning. And then let's create a zoom effect. That, and we'll pan so it's going where we want. Okay, let's make it a little bit less stiff. So we'll make it faster, or even maybe give it some time before it starts, so the viewer can see what it's going into. And we can go ahead and cut the camera and the clip right here because we're going to transition into a new scene now. So it's clip 1. Clip 2 is going to be our 3D electricity tunnel. So let's start dragging in some of these stock clips. This one's pretty good. You guys can maybe overlay them a tiny bit before the zoom happens, just so it kind of eases it in like this. And now let's create another camera so that we actually have this going forward. Create a new camera here. Camera. And we'll start it right here. Make these all 3D like this by enabling that switch. And then in camera 2, let's open up our transform and set up our keyframe. So we want this to travel forward. Let's click C to get our zoom, or alternatively, since we're looking at nothing, you can just grab this. You can just use this Z-axis position value, and let's just move it to the right. You can see it continues our zoom. So now let's again add some motion blur, so we can just enable our motion blur switches. Let's drop in some camera lens blurs onto here. Give it like a value of 5 or 6. You guys could also go to your effects and presets, search for an optics compensation effect, and then we'll check on reverse lens distortion and crank up the POV. That way it sort of looks like it's stretching towards the camera. If you guys want, you can keyframe it. So we can set it to like 0 here. Keyframe, and as we go through our tunnel, make it stretch towards the camera. All right, so just like that, we have a quick little tunnel. And of course, the more time you put into this, the better it's going to look. That's your basics for putting together something like this. And then let's transition into the next shot. Again, keeping it similar to the music video that we're breaking down. It'd be better if the shot was actually somebody with the camera moving through the crowd. Again, we could create a new camera here. And we could sort of zoom it through. Like again, we're traveling through that crowd like in the original video. Just by clicking C with our camera, setting those keyframes. Again, make sure that this is a 3D layer so it actually moves. And then something like this. Make it a bit faster by pulling those keyframes in. And then Control-Shift-D to make splits, and then add in whatever ending shot you want it to be. So basics of creating that sort of traveling forward effect. Let's keep moving along here and talk about a bit of easier, more subtle things that we can do in Premiere. So right here, you see we have another match cut. We talked about that earlier. We'll go in and create a match cut in a bit in Premiere. First, I want to show you this right here, because this is something that they use a lot to sort of create speed in these edits. Everything's happening pretty quick, so I'll try and go slow just so you can see it. So right here, from this shot to the next, see how it's kind of jumpy and it just pops right in with a bit more speed. And you can see right here, this frame. And if I go back and forth, you can see it's sort of skipping a frame. I like to call this a jitter frame transition. We're essentially just sort of cutting out a little bit of space in between for one frame just to make it look a little bit faster and pop into the next like that. So let's open up Premiere and talk about some simple things like match cuts, like creating a jitter frame transition. All right, so I have some raw footage here, and I'm gonna go ahead and cut out a little bit. So if we were to make a normal cut here, again, you just find where you want the cut to be, click C or Control K, just delete this and then connect the next scene. So here's just your normal rough cut. But if you want to add a bit of speed, again, it helps having some natural movement in the shot like this one. Let's go ahead and try and create that jitter frame. So again, paying attention to the movement in the scene, whenever he's about to do something with a bit of velocity, like moving his hand down like that, we can sort of scroll in here by holding down Control Alt mouse wheel, click C and just cut. And let's just skip a couple of these frames and try and make that movement look a bit faster. And that's really as easy as it needs to be. And pay attention, if it's a little bit too big of a jump, you guys can just Control Z, maybe take off a little bit. It doesn't have to skip, you don't have to cut out that much, just enough to add that bit of jittering movement like that. I think that looks a lot better. So there you go. If you guys want to, again, they even added a tiny bit of editing onto that jitter frame, and it really just looked like a bit of noise. Turn off color noise, give it a bit of grain. And then it looked like a bit of a channel invert, so you can search for inverts in your effects in Premiere. And let's actually duplicate this little clip first. So we'll hold down Alt, click and drag up, drag that onto here. And then in your effect controls, you guys can come down to the channel inverts. And if you want a bit of color like they did in that original music video, you can change and sort of invert any of these color channels. And then just take your blending mode here if you don't want this full-on color blast, and you can sort of blend it in like multiply. And of course, go to your lumetri color if you guys want to fully customize this with like saturation, etc. Or just keep changing around the blending mode until you have something you like. It gives a bit of a flash with that jitter as well. And here's playing it in slow motion. All right, so when it comes to our match cuts, this is again pretty easy. You guys can do this with Premiere. You guys can do this with After Effects with those AE cameras like I was talking about. You just want to find two spots where your frame lines up, or use your transform tools to create a spot where the frames line up. So right here we have Future looking forward at the camera. We're going to find another clip where he's looking forward at the camera, and then we're just going to transform to make those two line up. Maybe right about here. Now a nice little trick for this, what you can do is place this clip a little bit underneath, like this. Then you can lower the opacity of this top clip. So in your effect controls, go to opacity, bump this down, and then just go ahead and take your scale, click on this motion button here on your top clip, and just try and line these up as best as possible. And then put your opacity back up. And there you go. Easy as that for a simple little match cut. It's really just lining things up. If you guys wanted to, you could always keyframe too if you're zooming in too much. Maybe you're zoomed in too much here. You can keyframe, go a bit, and then just click these reset buttons. And you'll see how you still get that match cut, but you can go back to whatever you're trying to show in the scene. Another nice, easy little seamless cut transition you can do in Premiere that doesn't take that much time or effort. And other than that, there isn't really too many things I can show you in the software that'll help you achieve the look. It's using simple things like that, but it's just paying attention and having the eye and having the vision for where to apply those things and just knowing where they would work best. It also helps in this scene, there's a ton of flashing lighting and disorientation, so they can make some really easy seamless cuts just playing off the lighting. Whenever it goes dark, they can make a cut. Now I want to talk about some scenes here because a lot of them are similar to what we've already shown you, but a few of them are different. Now this, for example, here is pretty cool because what he did is rotoscoped out somebody doing a backflip in a separate scene and placed them in this scene to make it look like there's a crowd around him. A great way of using that roto brush tool and just compositing together a scene that looks better than what it would have looked like as a standalone shot. Pretty cool. And you can tell it's rotoscoped here just by the differences in lighting. So right here you can see the lighting is just completely different. You can also see a little bit of fraying around the edges. So you know it's roto brushed. Of course, at full speed, you literally cannot tell. You may have had to do some color grading just to make it match a little bit with the background so it didn't stand so out of place. But it allows to give a bit more emphasis on this specific motion while still keeping an interesting background. Even right here when he pops back in before everyone else, it's giving more emphasis to that movement. So keep that in mind. I'm not going to show you the roto brush in After Effects just because I've talked about it a bunch. So I'll leave a link below if you want to learn a bit more about that. Here's another little simple transition where they're just doing an invert color transition. So everything is super blue here just from the lighting. And then he inverts the colors, makes it red, and that's where he makes his cut. And you can see the color goes back to normal here. That's pretty easy to do, especially considering this red is sort of blending in with the natural lighting again. Just make a cut before our transition happens in that match cut and on the second clip as well. And again, let's go to our effects and search for that invert. This is going to look best if everything already has a ton of saturated color. Now, alternatively, if you want a specific color washed over everything here, you guys can hold down Alt and duplicate this clip like we did before with the jitter cut. Go and search for a tint effect and drop that onto the duplication. And then let's take this map white. Again, this is going to change the color of the highlights. So you can say, for example, you want red. There you go. Now you have this black and red look. If you want to instead change the shadows, you can keep white highlights and have red shadows. So it's up to you. I think that this red highlights looks pretty cool, the red and black. And you guys can just duplicate the next clip in your transition and copy and paste these effects if you want that sort of red flash as well, like that. If it's a bit too in your face and distracting, of course, play around with your blending modes. That's why we duplicate these clips so that we have the normal one underneath here and we can still change and blend these blending modes. So in our effect controls, color dodge, screen, you guys have a bunch of different options for how you want to blend this. So just going through and showing you some more examples of what we've shown you. Here is another match cut, but again, making it a bit more interesting and unique. So you have a spin here. Here's another shot of him spinning and turning around to match cut into. Pretty cool, seamless. And then he also match cuts this shot into another one. So a double match cut, and that looks pretty cool. So again, take the fundamentals, but put your own spin on it, experiment, and that's really what can make some unique shots in your own work. And that's about it, guys. A lot of match cuts, like I said, a lot of just playing to the energy, a lot of keeping everything seamless, matching the visual. I love this because it's not oversaturated. It's not too in your face. You've seen Gibson Hazard do some crazy 3D things where he completely transforms the entire video. He doesn't need to do that. He can use 3D to create some cool parts, but essentially it's just editing to the music and making things flow. That's all you need. And that's about it, guys. I hope you did enjoy this. The next video is going to talk all about 3D car animations. You see that in a ton of music videos, a bunch of 3D cars zooming around. So I think that that'll be super useful for you guys. If you have any other ideas, leave them in the comments down below. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for supporting. Have a nice Thanksgiving break, and I'll see you guys in the next one.